Hey everybody, welcome to Away Games, the Chicago Cubs podcast, number 49. I'm Kevin McCaffrey, and I'm here. We have a surprise guest. You're probably not a surprise now if you've read the description. I probably blew it there. But Ken Schultz is here.
Jesus, really?
Yeah. Oh, shit. I surprised Ken. Oh, man. This...
Special for number 49, man. Your Frank Castillo episode.
Oh, you go...
I'm the guy.
You go Castillo. I appreciate that. R.I.P. Frank Castillo.
Absolutely. Skypoint. And, and also apparently, then the accompanying lecherous old man advance at his wife from Harry Carey, too. So...
Wait, what is this now?
This happened every one of Frank Castillo starts, especially at home. At some point, Arnie Harris would find a shot of Tracy Castillo in the stands, and Harry, being a 70, perhaps 80-something-year-old man at that point, would say something that almost definitely would get Me Too'd in this era, and then would follow with the Harry Carey, ha, 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 dirty old man trademark laugh.
I do. I'm glad we've made some strides, I suppose, societal. Not the Cubs. A lot of the Cubs organization, I guess, hasn't lately. But I do appreciate, and I'm happy for Frank Castillo that. Of all the guys with the wife, like if you just had to look at the roster and be like, whose wife, just based on the dude, is Harry going to go after? Frank Castillo's an underdog, I think. You know.
Yeah. It's and I think that kind of became his calling card. That, and I think the no-hitter he took in the ninth in 95. Like those, if you ask any Cub fan of our age who remembers watching TV, like those are the two things about Frank Castillo you remember. Yeah. And I would give, honestly, even though we are in a much better, much more enlightened time, that if Len Casper were to break out a dirty old man laugh at some point in the next 162 games, like that would be one of the highlights of the year. For me. That's instant gift worthy, like all around. So.
He's going into year 15. Got to time to freshen it up, which I could not believe when I saw that today.
It absolutely doesn't feel like that, does it?
No, I saw. So they announced I saw like the spring training schedule today, basically. So the first broadcast game on TV of spring training is going to be March 2 against the Brewers. And then I think there's kind of a good number of games before that are not televised, it seems, because I think
only, I guess, like they to do the internet streaming broadcast with Len, and I think with the Tennessee Smokies play-by-play guy does it.
Oh, really? That's fun. Yeah. I think I saw him at the prospects panel at the convention. He was there, but. Yeah, I think it starts like February 23rd. I saw for like the radio broadcast. But anyway, when I saw that, it said 15. Len going into his 15th year, and I was like, man, it does not feel like
not at all
15 for him. And then JD going into his 7th, and to me, I was like, it feels like JD's been around longer than that. To me,
yeah, I can see that. How long was Chip the play-by-play guy? That's
Yeah.
To 04, does that sound about right?
It's got to be, right? Yeah, because 15 brings us up to now then, yeah.
That's half a Len at this point, which certainly it doesn't feel that way.
Totally, yeah. And man, Chip, for I think how most Cubs fans feel about Chip, he oversaw a pretty dense period of Cubs history from that 98 team through the 04 team.
Yeah, he made some of it himself too.
He did. That's true. Yeah. Him and Steve turning full heel by the end. That was
No baseball team has ever really tried to employ the deliberate heel broadcaster, have they? Close.
Yeah, the full Bobby Heenan style. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. The guy that turns on his own team at the end. Like Stoney, certainly by the end of 04, especially confronting Dusty Baker directly after one of the games he blew and pretty much asking him questions that essentially said, why did you fuck this up?
Yeah.
That's certainly about as close as we get. But yeah, no one has ever gone the full Heenan or Jesse the Body or Jerry the King Lawler in his prime. So
I mean, WrestleMania weekend, they should be in if we're going to do theme days.
Nondescript, like San Diego Padres team should really try considering that as like one of their trademarks to see if that would get people just to pay attention for a year.
Well, I saw the Marlins are trying to up the game day experience not baseball, but
is the first good idea the Marlins have had, certainly in the Jeter era and probably in the Laureate one too. That's trying to bring in the the World Baseball Classic atmosphere into an American baseball environment, and absolutely 100%.
Okay. I didn't see that was sort of specifically what they were going for, but that's that's.
I think they've carved out a special section where they're encouraging fans to bring drums and noisemakers, and just to see if they can make any kind of noise at all in Marlins Park, because that certainly hasn't existed over the past 5-6 years at least.
So. No, that's true. That is possibly their first good idea.
This is 100% support it, and nothing else in that organization.
Yeah, great idea. Now contract them. Just get rid of it.
Move the fun fans over to like all the other parks, but yes, get rid of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw that the 15 years of Len and 7 years of JD. So that's pretty.
And it's been 15 and 7 years of genuine greatness.
JD picked a pretty good 7.
Yeah. Yes. JD, the first couple a little difficult, but that's the equivalent of winning the Cub broadcaster lottery.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, you think about, compare the number of interesting teams JD has seen in his 7 years with the number of interesting teams that Jack Brickhouse saw over like 50 plus. And I would venture to guess that you're probably about even.
Yeah. At this point, Jack had the one run, and that was really, that was it.
That's,
and then some weird years that you wrote about. was that any of the gimmick years? The
a bunch
of them, right?
Brickhouse was broadcasting all through the College of Coaches, and athletic director Colonel Whitlow running his charges through the Air Force drills before the season. That was all Jack. Then DeRocher came in, and apparently Brickhouse and DeRocher hated each other, like from like the first day practically. Leo came in, decided that fans loved Jack Brickhouse and Ernie Banks, and decided that both those people had to go. Like that.
Great.
Yeah.
Great thinking.
It was him or them. Brickhouse, when he would talk about 69 in later years, would be incredibly sympathetic to all the players, but anytime he talked about the management, you knew he kind of felt like just the slightest bit of perverse pleasure that they collapsed for DeRocher.
Right.
They just couldn't stand each other.
Man, yeah. No, it is looking at that many decades and just trying to pick out any sort of fun. It does, that makes you feel good about now. Do we want to talk about the shitty stuff first before we get to the other things, or what?
Let's rip the Band-Aid off.
Sure.
As well.
So the Ricketts family is bad, is my opinion.
Yeah,
for the most part. And someone I actually had there was a reasonable exchange on Twitter with yesterday, believe it or not, with a Cubs fan. I could pull it up, but he knows who he is. But he basically was saying, that. While the Ricketts have bad politics, they've overseen, or I think he said, I don't think he meant it like this, but he said, have given us the best era of the Cubs. And I was like, there is an element of that's true, where they have been the owners for, this great time. Given us, I wouldn't go so far as to say. They made a couple of good hires and then haven't quite gotten in the way for the most part, I guess.
And that's the best quality you can have of a baseball owner,
right,
is someone who says, okay, here is the money you need, and now I will let you make the decisions because you know more about this than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And in that one particular aspect, up until this offseason, yes, Tom Ricketts has been a good baseball owner.
Right.
I will go with you to that point.
Yes. And then this week, they basically, the big thing was there was a bunch of emails. Joe Ricketts is just, racist uncle, basically, and is contributing to some of these responses too. It wasn't just him going ha-ha to things. You can find all the details about it literally just about anywhere online now. But I feel like one thing that you see a lot of people saying, and I'm sure there's elements of truth to this too, where they say, people are like, well, that Ricketts, he's not involved with the team. To me, okay, sure, I'll believe some of that. But if my dad buys me a car and I'm driving it, it's kind of my dad's car. Still, I feel like. So it's not like he's not completely detached from all of this. He is involved here. He made, it's his money that I guess he gave to everybody, but
it would be like, your dad buying a car, and then like you discover like underneath the hood, he's taken a key to scrawl out "bomb Iraq again."
Yeah, I think this time we'll get it. Yeah.
I think the Joe isn't technically a Cubs owner. At this point, it's what you say to try to make yourself feel better about rooting for a team that his money is in.
Right.
And it's also a way for Tom to conveniently distance himself from those comments and say, well, he's representing himself and he has no actual say in the running of my organization. He was the first guy you gave a goddamn World Series ring in the ring ceremony. Let's make sure that that's understood.
Right.
The first guy you gave a ring is someone who we have video saying that he doesn't give a shit about baseball. He just cares that Cub fans come to the park no matter what.
Yeah.
So there is certainly all that, but he doesn't control directly any of what the Cubs do, but all the money is his money.
Yes.
And
and that's what an owner is. Like, to some extent, it's providing the money, and now decisions are made by other people. Sure, but
if you think anybody who's one of the major secret forces of libertarian conservatism and business conservatism on the national scene is okay with saying, okay, here is all my money, and I will have nothing to say about it from here on out.
Yeah,
that would be literally the first time that's ever happened. Like,
it would be the opposite of everything he believes in, basically, and that he has believed in his whole life, and what made him that money. And the way that Tom has, distanced himself, the way that they've structured it, and the story they tell. That is the smart way to tell the story, because they know to some extent these aren't dumb people. Joe is dumb like old rich people are. Todd. I was saying, I've said this before, and this is a very specific reference. But seeing all the Ricketts siblings together, Todd is like the fourth Michael Keaton in Multiplicity, where they keep making copies, and then it gets to the end, and it's a copy of a copy of a copy, and you're like, yuck, what happened? What is this one? It just sounds different. It looks like something's wrong with it. Mentally, it's fucked. So, yeah.
They all have to have jackets of, like, the different stages of Michael Keaton that each one of them represents. I think that would, if they all came out in the convention wearing Michael Keaton jackets like that, I would actually give them points.
I'd respect it, some self-awareness. Yeah. But they've clearly built this in so that Tom, who is he's the best talker of the bunch. He's the one who's most comfortable in front of people. Obviously, Laura has, she seems to be a relatively credible person otherwise. But
is not as enthusiastic about executing people, we hope. So
sure.
Probably want to make him the face of the organization then.
Yeah, well, shades of gray within the Ricketts there.
Pete Ricketts what to do with Sammy Sosa. You don't want to hear the answer.
My God.
So.
Yeah, Sammy Sosa, unforgivable, but Addison Russell, let's help him through this. So it makes sense how they've structured it like this. So he can. So they tell us that he can have plausible deniability about everything. When no, that's not. They can't. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing about the way Tom has responded to this, and it's kind of it's one and the same with the way he's responded to just about every negative issue that's affected this team over the past maybe 3 years since the Chapman acquisition. That when it happens and something blows up among the fan base and in the public eye, whether it's Chapman, whether it's the acquisition of Daniel Murphy, whether it's Addison Russell, or whether it's his dad being a racist prick. Tom will give a very earnest-sounding statement to the media that makes it sound like he's genuinely concerned and looking into this, and then after that, crickets. Like that is his only response to everything negative, to this extent negative.
Right. Present a well-thought-out statement and disappear.
Right. And Evan Altman was kind of writing about this in his blog today and had some good thoughts that at a certain point, if you keep doing that, you're going to run into a situation where all of this negativity is going to compound itself over time, over and over again. And eventually it's going to blow up on you, and you aren't going to be able to save it just by referencing the Cubs brand. So at a certain point, statements are going to have to be followed by some kind of action here.
And the Cubs brand itself is changing. Like
right.
all of this adds up to affect what the Cubs brand is and what the world thinks about the Cubs and what Cubs fans think about the Cubs.
Yes.
I mean, if you're on Twitter at all, and you know how many Cubs fans, if you're on Twitter and I'm sure anywhere online, really, you know how many Cubs fans have struggled with this offseason, not just not signing big name players and spending money, but everything that's been so ugly about it from just a personal standpoint and not just political, from just a human standpoint. And that is changing what this, even how Cubs fans perceive this team.
Yeah. I think the best way I can encapsulate like how the perception of it is kind of slowly morphing over time. And it kind of really saddens me to think about this, but after so many years of making fun in one direction in a certain way, Cardinal fans now, in theory, could be entirely justified in creating a Twitter account called @BestOwnersChicago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And have the same kind of thing that we've been retweeting over and over about their fan base. Well, you can take it up a step, and the person controlling your team would be liking and favoriting unironically.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so, yeah. We've got some best fans St. Louis just who happen to own Cubs. The Cubs, yeah.
And I can't help but also think that this is also what happens when you have people who don't really understand kind of the vibe in the city of Chicago controlling one of the biggest institutions in the city. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to sound, like circle the wagons, like these guys aren't from around here so they can go to hell kind of thing.
Sure.
Like they don't put giardiniera on their Italian beef the way we should. But you have people who are heavily involved in Nebraskan conservative libertarian politics running the most famous team in the city of Chicago. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, that's a culture clash that's going to keep butting heads with each other, and it's already cost them whatever public financing that they were hoping to get from Rahm Emanuel back when they were trying to negotiate that from him when Joe Ricketts' super PAC leaked out.
Right.
But again, as you say, over time, you keep running up against a city that at least has the image of itself as a progressive and open-minded community like Chicago does, even though we both know that the city has more than its share of problems in and of itself.
Sure. A lot of them are very mad that we're talking about the quote-unquote political part of baseball right now, which I'll get to in a minute when you finish your thought. But
yeah. But eventually, at some point, you're going to turn off a large portion of the people who are concerned with projecting that image of the city, because we don't want this to be, Team Rand Paul and Team Ayn Rand and Team Ben Shapiro.
Any Rand.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. McNally, get the fuck out of here. Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of...
The only Rand that's good is handsome Ransom Jackson, my friend.
Oh, hell yeah, I'll take it. But I think, so... A lot of fans, and there is an element that I understand getting frustrated about, quote unquote, political talk around their favorite team, something that people like using as an escape. But here's the thing. It is not reporters, it is not podcasters that are making any of this political. It is the owners who have gone out of their way. That is the baseball that there is to cover right now. I saw, I don't think any of us have a signed Gordon Wittenmeyer poster in our rooms, but he was making very good points online today about this is the baseball to cover that is happening right now, and people are like, God, shut up about politics. That if he wasn't tweeting about that, there would be nothing to tweet about today.
I think sure a sign that we're living in baseball hell is the fact that Gordon Wittenmeyer is actually making good points on Twitter.
He was, yeah, I know.
Christ.
That's what I'm saying, and it's like there is a thing where it's just like that is what there is to cover right now.
Yeah, and it's impossible to separate baseball from politics when any story that's about ownership, one of the owners is the actual honest to goodness governor of Nebraska.
Yes.
that is his job, is politics.
And they've made it political. Anyone who was at the convention knows they went, it was a just big anti-alderman movement, basically.
You don't think Ryan Dempster by himself was just curious about Tom Tunney and wanted to know about
Dempster's a real, he's a real wonk. He's always on Fox, and
Dempster's favorite impressions are Harry Carey and Chris Cillizza.
So. Yeah, exactly. So that is, I also prefer to talk about on-field baseball things. Yes. I do, but this ownership has made this this other messy discussion. They've gone out of their way to make it that. That is what there is to talk about right now. And I understand people not wanting to read and listen to that, and you have that choice. But,
I don't want to sound like Northside Ken on line 1 at this point, but if you don't want us to talk politics right now, well, then give us a win.
Yeah,
give us an actual bit of baseball news that gets us excited. And makes us, this is still why we're into this team and why we are getting geared up for this new year.
Yeah.
Then, you want us to get the focus off you, there's a very easy way to do that.
Do the baseball.
Power is in your hands, Ricketts family.
Yes.
So.
There were a couple of fun things that happened this week. One is from a man who is from my alma mater. And not only from my alma mater, but was there when I was for a couple of years. My man Luke Hagerty from Chirp Chirp, it's bird time, baby. Ball State's own Luke Hagerty. He was drafted in 2002. I was at Ball State from 2000 to 2004. And I remember being very excited. I remember being in the Robert Bell building on campus, logging into Baseball America and tracking everything that was going on. And then the Cubs drafting a guy who was on campus at that time. Obviously, for me, it was bonkers. And if you're listening to this, you probably know the story already. But basically, he's a 6'7" left-hander. Was a first-round draft pick in 2002. He basically got the yips, tried to work his way through it. In 2008 was the last time he was in professional ball, and he came back. He's throwing 99. Or it's topping at 99, really sitting 97, but which is also fine. And the Cubs signed him to a minor league deal.
So when you were at Ball State and you found out this news, did you make it a point to try to get to any baseball games to check him out in person at that point?
Man, I really should have. I did not see any games in person. I'm trying to think. I guess that would have been. Let's see, it was freshman. So I guess that was sophomore going into my junior year. Yeah, I did not see any, but I really should. Well, because the Ball State also had the number 1 overall pick in the draft that year. Brian Bullington, the right hand.
He's Pirates, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Huge bust.
Yes, because he was a Pirates draft.
Yeah, that's how that works.
The Pirates and the Cubs were pretty much 1 and 2 in terms of the why are we wasting our time even considering any of this?
Oh, yeah, that was in the Ryan Harvey era of the Cubs, I think, maybe? Just Mark Powelek?
Well, the 2002 draft, and I looked this up just before we started to make sure, that was the Bobby Brownlee was first Cubs pick of that particular draft, right before Hagerty. And this, same kind of mold of the Pollocks and the Hayden Simpsons of the world. Because I can't let any discussion of our colleges slide without trying to top you on that.
Go for it.
Oddly enough, I can give you a Kenyon College alum who, to this point, has had a bigger impact on Cubs history.
Okay.
Because
Allison Janney.
Yes. Well, couldn't quite control the slider, sadly. But,
sure, another yips.
Go into the West. It was either the West Wing or Boise at that point.
Sure.
Well,
yeah, understandable.
Actually,
pay minor leaguers. Yeah.
Hall of Famer Bill Veeck is a Kenyon College dropout.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. There's only one line in his autobiography that mentions that sometime in his sophomore year that he was hanging out, just sitting in an open window and got drunk enough to fall out to the ground. But yes, Kenyon claims him.
He freaking Birbiglia'd his way into a baseball career. Good for him.
And the man who planted the ivy is a Kenyon not quite alum, but we'll say he is just for the hell of it.
Sure. I mean, that counts. I technically didn't graduate Ball State, but they still claim me. So it's, that's fine. I think I'm giving a talk at the school in 2 weeks. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. I'm headlining in Indianapolis. If anyone wants to come see me in Indy, I'm at a Black Circle Brewing, brewing. I don't know. I'll be there. You can Google it. But it's February 16th. I'll be in Indianapolis and then, swinging through that place, and I'll be on the radio. I'm on Bob and Tom the Friday before that.
Like all Indiana culture.
I know, man. It's gonna
on Kevin that week.
Yeah,
Bob and Tom, and then you're hitting the Vonnegut Library that afternoon, and closing it out at the Motor Speedway for the week.
Hell yeah! It's just loading up the car with corn and driving on back.
But Hagerty, yes, this is what we should be talking about at this point. So I want to know what exactly it is that this driveline does.
Dude.
Gets all these pitchers to suddenly start throwing like 97, 98, 99. Like it boggles my mind how you can just show up there and all of a sudden add like 5 miles an hour to your arm.
Yeah.
Like if this were done like 10 years ago, everybody, the first thought in everybody's mind is, okay, what is he putting in his bloodstream?
Yeah, right. Are they? Yeah, is it the new name for Balco that they're basically is what? And that's not what I'm alleging. No, Don't sue me. I'm losing money on this.
Point of comparison, yes.
Right, but it is. But that absolutely, it's not crazy to see a 37-year-old man show up and throw 99 and be like, "What's up with that?" That is, and I am curious, what's up with that? I'm interested.
Yeah, and it's astonishing. And Jeff Passan's story on it is so great and so well told too.
Yeah.
The idea that he spent 7-8 years being told by everybody that crossed his path that you need to give this another shot at some point, and finally just decided I either am going to do this or live in regret for the rest of my life. And it turns out that he's throwing harder than everybody except like Chapman and Hicks.
Yeah.
2 or 3 other guys.
Yeah. And
wouldn't that be something if Jim Hendry left the legacy of Javi Baez and Luke Hagerty, but they were only good 5 years removed from the time he was fired.
Right. Yeah, that's true. He can. I thought Hendry probably had closed the book on himself at this point, but
that was the perfect summation of who Jim Hendry was as a GM too. Somebody who certainly could guess and could spot talent.
Yeah.
But would have no idea what to do with it or how to develop it for anything resembling a competent major league team. And so, you have a couple of his high end raw drafts and then give them to people who actually know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And you might have a couple of real baseball players.
Yeah. Oh man, it's exciting. There's just not a lot of lefties who are 6'7" and throw 99. And I hear the slider's good. So it's just the one thing the Cubs said when they were saying a lot over convention weekend, talking about we haven't taken enough shots on upside guys as pitchers. It's they should have taken more risks. They were too rigid on what they were looking for. It is. I mean, I'm happy about this story, but it is very indicative of the situation that one of their top upside guys in the organization is 37 years old, is the real high-end left-handed. But it's man, I don't know if I'm looking forward to seeing almost anyone more in spring training.
Absolutely, yes. And wouldn't it be fun if, he, dominated the spring training and then whatever he did to conquer his control issues and his yips, he passed the secret on to Dylan Maples at that point.
Oh yeah, and then they both go talk to Chatwood, and then that would be that's
suddenly the Cubs have their version of the Yankees bullpen.
That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff sitting out there.
I mean that's the kind of thing that when you have an elite bullpen, that's the kind of shit that falls in your favor.
Right.
You can't really design an elite bullpen at all. You can't, hot take, by the way, and I told you this during the convention, that this is My big prediction is that Andrew Miller is going to fail for the Cardinals this year. So
I mean, fingers crossed. He seems like a good guy, but I do not want him to do well this year.
Yeah, I next couple of years, I am perfectly fine with him performing at the level he did all of last year.
Yeah,
so.
that is cool with me too. And then hopefully we can get the Driveline guys to go talk to Junichi Tozawa and George Kontos and get them up to 97 or so.
Why aren't they just being employed by a team at this point? If this is all they do,
Driveline is the only thing that's had a good offseason besides owners' money. Those are the only things that have had a good offseason this year. But yeah, that is, and the Cubs also signed another guy from Driveline, Robert Robbins, I believe his name was, and there's video of him with a just disgusting changeup. If you want to go look at it online too, that's available. And the Cubs signed Tony Barnette. I don't know if you saw that. Well, I'm sure you did.
Days ago, he is already an 80 grade tweeter, so we got that going.
What was the tweet again? It was
sadly, it was something about. Informing the fan base that sadly his name does not rhyme with Tarper.
Right. Yes. It was like, oh, the weather's nice. It's it's good time. It's getting to be time for, great time for Cubs baseball. They just signed someone. Sorry, his name does not rhyme with, Warp or something. But yeah, and he seems like an interesting dude whose numbers are really, his arm was hurt a little bit, arm or shoulder. I forget exactly what it was. But he's a guy who spent some time in Japan. He's sitting at like 93, it's still 93-ish on the fastball. And I tweet about this, but, only 1.7 walks per nine, gave up less than 0.7 homers per nine in Texas. Very Jesse Chavez-esque.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and also, coming over from Japan, great strikeout to walk ratio, great peripherals. If we've got our own Miles Michaelis this year, I am all in favor of that.
I'm into it. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be tough to have a 28-man bullpen this year, but if we can I know the facilities are larger than they used to be, at least back there. It's going to be
they're adding on all the extra stadium clubs. It's for so they don't have to go back to Des Moines. They can just go to the Captain Morgan Club directly.
That sounds great. Oh man, what a dream baseball career for me. That's perfect. I think that's most the signings.
So I posed you a question on Twitter when you asked for Q&As today. So based off of the Luke Hagerty news this week, if you could pick one failed Cubs prospect from any era of the past to come back rejuvenated and come back at like a Driveline level,
right?
Who would you most like to see redeemed among failed Cub prospects in history?
I don't know if this is. I'll give a couple answers quickly, sort of different categories. One, I was just such a huge Corey Patterson mark. And Corey had a major league career, so I don't know if that really counts in the same way as an answer.
It does.
Corey
Patterson was not at all the player that we were promised. So
right.
I would say,
just that, a guy who had like 70, 80 grade speed, 70 raw power. We were told, in this small body, and he had that 1.5 season where he just kicked ass.
Yeah. Very Babbitt driven, by the way. So if we had known about advanced numbers back in early 2003, a lot of us would have said, okay, you might want to bring Kenny Lofton back next year.
Yeah, he might not be a pure 300 hitter, which I think he was when he went down. But so Corey was my guy. I remember Peter Gammon saying Bobby Hill. That Adam Mamawala, who is missing, but he will be back next week. Don't worry. Adam, his pick was Bobby Hill. I think that's a good pick.
Yeah, very good pick. Very solid. Bobby Hill and Hee-Seop Choi were going to be like the next. It's hard to say, Santo Williams coming up from the Cubs minor leagues. But that would have been like the farthest. You'd have to go back that far to find like two minor league players who came up at about the same time who were, as good as they projected Choi and Hill to be. These
are like top 20 prospect types in the game. I mean, that's why, Hee-Seop Choi was traded for a pretty young Derek Lee straight up. Was it? Yeah.
Pretty much. And
almost, right?
For dumping a bit of salary after the World Series. So
right. Imagine that.
Go figure. They did take a little bit of advantage of that. But at the time, it was not considered as lopsided a trade as it turned out to be because, again, we'd seen a pretty decent half season from Hee-Seop right before he ran into Kerry Wood during that famous game in 2003.
Yeah.
So I think kind of the same thing with Patterson, that a lot of people thought, if he comes back healthy and stretches that out to a full year, that they might have something. But obviously, it was one of the best trades of the Hendry era, as well we know, and it has been discussed ad nauseum.
I'll say for my prospect who truly never made it, who I would have liked to say, I'll say catcher Pat Klein.
Yeah, yes. That there was talk. He was like early 2000s. Am I remembering?
Early 2000s, late 90s, even maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
like that was shortly after the Rick Wilkins flame out, and they thought, okay, then this next guy's coming up, and he is going to be like everything you would want out of the position. And I'm not. Did he even make the major leagues?
I don't think he ever got an at bat.
No, but I definitely remember like he was like either 1 or 2, like maybe like just behind Kerry Wood in terms of the old Vineline prospect lists.
Yeah, I think they were supposed to be the battery. It was supposed to be Wood to Klein for many years, and how about
Vineline prospect list of that era might as well have been subheadlined, "Here's 50 names you ought to forget."
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, get your Ozzie Timmons jersey now. Who's your number one for?
I am standing for Gary Scott.
Gary Scott. Yeah, he was the kind of a legendary prospect of the 80s, right?
Absolutely. Late 80s or early 90s. Mm-hmm. Like he was supposed to be the answer of who will then be the next great Cubs third baseman after Ron Santo. Like he was going to stop the drought and stop the streak. And his first spring training, I want to say maybe either 91 or 92. I think 91. He tore it up. Like had a full-on Scott McClain.
Yeah, hell yeah.
In the spring, and people thought, oh yeah, here, 90. I think people forget how excited fans were going into that 91 season, because that off season, the Cubs were. There's no good equivalent this off season because nobody spent on free agents, but like the Cubs were like maybe the Marlins going into Marlins Park era, spending on a splurge on free agents, or like that one year where the Padres went nuts.
Right.
Offseason, they had signed Danny Jackson, George Bell, and Dave Smith, which were like 3 of the biggest names in the market. And then we also heard that there's this super hot stud prospect coming out of Iowa who's going to be the next Ron Santo. You're not going to believe it. And we thought, watching the spring training, yep, here it is. This is Sandberg, Dunston, Grace, Gary Scott, baby. Infield is set for the next decade.
Man.
And then as soon as the season started, he struggled to hit 100.
Right. Kevin Ory-esque to throw out another third baseman.
Without even a tease of Ory during the regular season. Like Ory at least had like the first couple months of 98 to make you think, okay, he's at least, major league ready. And
he's learning. Yeah, right.
Gary Scott was overmatched from day one. And they tried it a couple years, like that year and the next year. They tried to get him into the lineup as an everyday third baseman, and each time was hitting like 080. And he had one moment. And if you do a YouTube search of Gary Scott, the first thing that will come up is this. Early season, I want to say 92, like sometime late April, early May. And I remember watching this as it happened. Game against the Phillies, the Cubs were either tied or trailing late, and they had the bases loaded, 2 outs, and Gary Scott was at the plate. And he somehow managed to work like a 13-pitch at bat off of, I want to say, Kurt Abbott, the Phillies pitcher, because I just watched the video going into this.
Oh, nice. Look at that research.
So, yeah, it was one of those like Rizzo against the Diamondbacks last year.
Right.
Pitch after pitch after pitch. You can't get me out. You can't get me out. You can't get me out. And the crowd, at about like pitch 6 or 7,
they start
getting louder and louder. And finally, 13th pitch, he hit one high and deep to left, and you see the left fielder like trailing back with his glove up, looking up, and finally just hits the left field wall and goes like 1 row into the left field bleachers, and everybody just goes completely insane.
Oh man!
And you can just see this moment of exultation as he's rounding the bases. Like, I have established myself for at least one night. And it was just the best feeling.
And that makes that always makes me feel great, because like he will always have that, and that is great. That is, it's, you know, because that's an awesome. I mean, in a comedy, in my own life, I've told myself that about like doing Letterman. I'm like, even if I suck ass forever, like that was the one homer I hit into one row into the left field stands. So, and I think we, you know, even if they're not on your team, I think we all sort of, like, unless you're a real piece of shit, you don't root for these people to work their whole lives and completely fail, you know? It's nice even...
Fail at this point, I am perfectly okay with that.
If who?
If Addison Russell wanted to completely fail at this point, I am on board. 100%.
Oh, yeah. He's done enough. He's done enough already. Continue, please. Get all your shit in the box to the left. Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, I think it's. I love seeing moments like that for guys who never quite got what they're supposed to be.
For one night, it certainly is nowhere near the same in terms of historical importance. But for one night, that was like his Sandberg game.
Right.
Like he has a Gary Scott game, and the fact that it's posted on YouTube means I can't be the only one who remembers watching this. So there have to be people. If he occasionally meets Cub fans who remember who he was, I'm sure at some point someone brings up, hey, the Grand Slam, right? And that's well, it's not a career well spent, but it's a moment well spent.
I mean, it's a moment, and it's the kind of moment where your whole life led up to that. So many years, so many hours leading up to that, and you got it. You put a ball over the fence in the major leagues in a big moment, and that's man.
That was like, and to have the entire park going nuts for what you just did and call you out for the curtain call. Like, it's you know, it's cruel that it'll only last for that particular couple of minutes, but you at least have that kind of that sense memory. Yeah. That's got to be, if you can go back to that, what a wonderful feeling that must be.
Gary Scott, go talk to Driveline. Let's get this. Let's go get Grand Slam number 2.
Get with it here.
He's got to be 50 something now. Yeah.
Work on Luke Hagerty's arm, Gary Scott's swing, and Adam Greenberg's head while you're at it.
God, this is. I've made the dumbest Frankenstein in history. The
kind of failed Cubs.
I can't wait for Hagerty to just come in like late 90s jacked up Ron Vallone and just blow people away. The final thing I wanted to get to, we had a question from our friend Tyler online, who was addressing rumors that I'm sure you probably saw this week, kind of like rumors that we've heard before, but I've never been quite sure how actual rumor they were, about the Giants wanting to basically swap bad contracts, but for an outfielder, getting rid of Cueto, or I saw Longoria as well mentioned. So yeah, the numbers on that, roughly Cueto is owed $68 million through 2021. And he's recovering this year. He's not going to be, really pitching this year, but then he's on contract for the next couple of years. Hayward's owed roughly, I think, $96 million through 2023. But this year and next year, not after this season, after the next one, he has a full no trade clause too, which is relevant. Whereas right now he can only block to 12 teams. Although, what do I know? But he doesn't strike me as a guy who would really really get in the way if there was a trade. But what are your feelings on that rumor and what you would want to see happen in a perfect world?
Well, I mean, first of all, every baseball owner can afford every contract that's out there. Yep. So the idea that you have to swap bad contracts at this point to sign anybody is ludicrous in the extreme.
Agreed.
But given that that's how Major League owners seem to operate, so I might be the least down on Hayward of maybe anybody in the fan base at this point. If you're going to trade him and then sign Harper, sure.
Right.
Go for it.
Right.
But just to trade him as a straight up contract for contract, he's still giving you value at this point. Like,
the money's the money. It's whatever. It's spent. Yeah.
I mean, it's rough and frustrating when he has those stretches where he doesn't know what to do at the plate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, last year, by every measure of wins above replacement, was his best year in a Cubs uniform. So it's not like he's getting worse at this point.
Right.
And in the field, he certainly is still such an above average and such an above replacement level glove that particularly I think it helps with Almora's bizarre lack of range in center, that if you have Hayward covering so much ground in right, you can probably figure out how to shift them so that you play into Almora's strength of catching the damn ball whenever he gets to it.
Almora and Hayward make a good defensive. That's 2/3 of a good defensive outfield. And Hayward is a difference maker in right, and he's clearly the second best center fielder at worst.
Yes,
he's a better center fielder than Happ. We've talked about that.
And so I mean, just based on the scenarios presented in that hypothetical, I would rather have Hayward playing this year than Johnny Cueto sitting for the entire year.
Yeah,
and certainly would rather have Hayward than Evan Longoria in any context.
I don't see any fit whatsoever with a Longoria swap at all. I can, it's sort of exactly like you said. I can squint and see. I can see where you owe less money overall to Hayward or to Cueto, you would, than Hayward. Although when we're talking this fucking luxury tax stuff, it's a difference of $1 million on the luxury tax this year. So it's not even a difference this year to that magical tax. Right. And same thing, they can absolutely afford it. Not only can every major league owner afford it, the Cubs owner and the Giants owners, they can really afford it. And these are the years that matter most for the Cubs. This is the window. There could very well be a labor apocalypse after 2021, and that is when these contracts are going through. So these are the years we need to make matter. So my first choice is sign Harper, and then you have Hayward and Almora basically platooning in center and filling in if anyone gets hurt, because you can afford that, and that's the better team. But if also, as you said, if this money is the thing that's going to be the thing, okay, sure. Harper is better, yes, but Hayward,
and if it's only affecting the luxury tax by such a small amount this year,
right?
You don't really have to worry so much about how you're up against the tax in a couple of years going forward, because aren't they losing a fair amount of contracts next year?
A bunch.
That honestly doesn't really matter.
No, it shouldn't.
It should. I mean, they'll figure out ways to make it matter.
Right.
As we said at the top, the Ricketts are trash.
Yes, the Ricketts are trash. Follow us at awaygamespod on Twitter. I tweeted that yesterday. That was one of those where I think most listeners would be able to tell that was a Kevin tweet. As opposed to...
Is that going to be like the newest version of one of the proposed T-shirts for the podcast? Is Clint Hurdle is a racist, and so is our owner.
Yes, exactly. In small print on the back, parentheses. Also, he's not the only racist. That'll be
Avenue Q, I guess, of sports leagues at this point, that everybody is a little bit racist.
Yes, exactly.
That's always the case.
Yeah. Avenue Q, the 5th Street, bordering Wrigley Field now. I think that's all I had on the books. Ken, do you have any other parting thoughts before we wrap it up here?
I mean, those were the thoughts that I had going in, so I think I'm good too.
Sweet. Thanks for pinch hitting. Do you have anything you want to plug in particular?
I've got a new piece coming up at Cubs Den.
Nice. I don't know if you've been on the pod since you joined the Cubs Den team.
No. Since Beepley Wrigleyville got consolidated into the main site.
Right.
For all your Cubs related needs, I checked out some of the owners or some of the editors in Cubs Den, and they were like, "Yeah, we will be happy with your snarky recaps and your."
Great work. If you like the Cubs at all, if you don't, I do. I was going to say if you don't, it would be bananas for you to listen to this podcast, but that's not true. As we all know, Cubs fans and White Sox fans share one thing: all they think about is the Cubs. So there could be White Sox fans listening to this hating all of it right now too. That's very possible. I was tweeting with some of them last night. But if you love the Cubs, please, follow Ken. Some of the best sports writing out there. and Cubs writing, a lot of Cubs writing specifically, but some of the best straight up sports writing. Yeah. Give us the Twitter handle.
Twitter handle is at Ken Schultz _ SCHULTZ _.
Sweet.
And yeah. That's Instagram at Ken Thin Guy if we want to do that too. So.
Yeah, we sure do. And we're at Away Games Pod on Instagram and Twitter. Please do subscribe and review and rate if you haven't. That would be nice. I'm Kevin. I'm at Kevin McCaff if you want to follow that too on Twitter and Instagram, all that shit. My car was once blown up by a pipe bomb in the Chicago suburbs, and I Insta-storied that today. So there's a teaser. Should still
Speaking
be
of White Sox fans.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Ken, great episode, number 49. This is how deep cut we are. We didn't even mention that it's Jake Arrieta's number as well.
Jesus, yeah.
Castillo and then Arrieta.
I always go to obscure 90s and not like obvious favorite Cubs of all time.
Got to.
Jesus.
That's great. Thanks for doing it, Ken.
All right. Thanks for having me, man. Good to talk.